We are in a series called Relation Shift. Relation Shift. Now that means that we're shifting gears. We're shifting in our relationship to look to what the Bible has to say about relationships. And that's a righteous relationship. Not a right, I'm not right, you're not wrong. It's a righteous. Because the only way this works is you become a follower of Christ. What I share with you the last 2 Sundays, this Sunday and next Sunday, the only way this works is you become a follower of Christ. Otherwise, you're trying to make something work that's not you. And we looked at that a couple of weeks ago when we looked at Romans chapter 8 when he says, the people that are not following Christ, their minds are controlled by the sinful nature because we're all born into that. We've all been there. And in that, that mind will not submit to God. That mind will not be obedient to God. That mind will not even try to please God. So everything I'm saying to you today in these weeks in righteous relationships, is about us following Christ. If we're not following Christ, if He's not our one thing, then this is never going to work for you. You can try and you're going to be more frustrated. But if you'll become a Christ follower and you'll do what Jesus has to say for you to do in your relationships, He'll take care of the rest. I promise you. He will take care of the rest. So you got to make Him your one thing, and you got to follow Him. And through it all, I love that last line of that Andre Crouch song that says, "Is His Word, is His Word." He trusted in the Word. And if you ever heard Andre in concert, he would always stay in the Word, always bring the Word out in that. And I appreciated that about him. You can tell his father was a Church of God in Christ pastor, and he knew the Word. Praise the Lord. So we're in a family fight. Now, that doesn't mean we're fighting with our family. Maybe some of you are, but that's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing that you fight for your family, not with your family, right? It's not easy because the people that are near us are the people we usually fight the first, right? I mean, we respond to them, they respond to us, it escalates, and before long, it's pull the gloves out, let's go, right? But that's not the goal. The goal is to fight for your family, not against your family. And so we want to learn to fight for our family. Paul said to his son in the faith, those who will not care for their relatives, especially those in his own household, your immediate family, have denied the true faith. He's saying if you're not fighting for your family, if you're not caring for your family, you've already denied faith. You've already begun to walk away from God because God's plan is that you walk in a fight for your family. Jude said it like this, I felt compelled and urged. I felt compelled and urged in Jude 1:3 to contend for the faith. Contend, fight for the faith that was once all trusted to God's holy people. We have to be fighting for our families, fighting for the faith of our families. How many of you know when you got family that chooses not to serve God? Maybe they walked away from the church. Maybe they've even walked away from God. Maybe they find another avenue for life. Maybe they're making different choices about identity and relationships and roles. Then maybe they've just all messed up. How many of you know that can get frustrating, get old, right? It can wear you out. But you got to keep fighting. If you don't fight, who will? Not fight against them, but fight for them. We have to learn to fight for them. And so I call it the fivefold family fight. Go back and listen to the first week. God gives us what we need as we fight for righteous family relationships. Today I'm going to talk about the happily ever after. Happily ever after. Anybody ever saw any of those stories, you know, in the little books or maybe on TV, and the last frame says, and they lived? Yeah, that's a lie. Come on, man. Who's ever lived happily ever? I mean, like nothing ever went wrong. That's the idea of that phrase, right? That nothing will ever go wrong. The prince and the princess rode off into the sunset. They lived in their castle, and they lived happily ever after. Yeah, you can't put two people in the same house for many years and everything be perfect. Can I get a witness? Yeah, the women raise their hand, but not many men. Scared. Y'all scared? Scared men. You want to see a scared man, put him beside his wife and ask him to say something like I just asked him to say. That's a scared man. I ain't going to say that. I'll hear it before I get to the parking lot. And if I don't hear it there, I'll get it in the parking lot. Right? Because we're afraid to even be honest. And look, you're not going to build real relationships if there's not honesty in that. Right? And so there is a sense of happily ever after, but it's understanding the scope of that. So I want to dive into this. It's righteously redefining our understanding of relationship. We begin in Him, and we begin with me. Look, if you take this or any relationship message, and you start saying, oh, you must be talking about Perry. You must be talking about Robert or Michael. You know, you must be talking about Sam. You ain't talking about me. If that's the way we approach it, we'll never grow. Right? We got to show up to grow. And showing up means that we own who we are, and we own that we may not be where we need to be, and that we need to grow. We need to grow as a husband. We need to grow as a wife. We need to grow as a parent. We need to grow as a child. We need to grow as a person. We need to grow as a friend. And so we have to own that. We got to say, righteous relationships begin in God, because I'm a follower of God. I'm going to do it His way. And it begins in me. Starts with me. It can't be everybody else's fault. How many of you know if it's everybody else's fault, after a while you realize there's more fingers pointing back at you than they are at them? Right? I love it when people come and talk to me and they say, well, I want to be careful with this because I don't want to put myself in a bad situation. But I'm going to say it. I had a pastor call me of a church I used to know. I'll just say it that way, in case they're watching online. And he said, didn't you tell me at one time that this particular member, when they came to the church while you were there, didn't you tell me the church they had left, they had some issues? And I said, yeah, I remember them relating a story about that to me. And I said, but I never had any real problems with them. He said, well, I've got a little issue. I said, really? And let me just tell you, he was being very kind with the word little. He had a huge issue. And I said, well, you know, Pastor, he began to, I said, it's a safe place. It's just me and you. So he tells me. And I said, you know what? It's like I'm sitting in that office and he's repeating what he did at the previous church. And I said, when he told me that the first time, I just kind of ignored it because I'm a pretty strong leader, you know? I mean, like, I'm going to lead you. I'm going to love you, and I'm going to learn to do that. And either you're going to follow, or if you're not following, I'm going to go find somebody else to lead. I mean, that's just, I'm going to try to do it Jesus way, and that's the only way I know how to do it. And so that's how I lead. And I'm not ugly about it. I'm not mean about it. I'm not mean-spirited about it. I don't make people do things. I just say, this is what Jesus said. Well, let's go do it. And it's just that simple to me. It's not hard. It's not rocket science to lead that way. And so this pastor was going through it, and he called me and talked to me. And I said, Pastor, you know, if he's doing the same things he did back then, it can't be two pastors from different parts of the country have the exact same issues. At some point, I would love to look at his previous record before that to see how many pastors had that same issue. Now, could pastors have the same issue? Yeah, absolutely. But how many of you know when you point, after a while, you realize there's more fingers pointing back at you, right? And so this brother had some issues he needed to deal with. Look, I could take it out of the past. I put it in the pastor relationship because I am one. But what if I put it in the husband and wife issue? It's like someone that may have been married about 5 times. Not to the same person. 5 different people. And every time as you look back over the notes, they had the same issues with the people they were married to. After a while, you start to realize it ain't like it seems, you know? There's bigger issues here, right? You could go in a relationship with a coworker, and they go from job to job to job to job to job, and it's always the boss's fault, or it's always the coworker's fault. At some point, if we want to grow up, then we got to own who we are, and we got to look at it. So the only way I can do this is not sit here and do counseling session with everybody in the room. My Lord, I would go crazy. But what I will do is say, here is those who would follow Christ the way they should follow Christ, even in their relationships. And so we'll look at that. And that's the common ground. No matter where we come from, no matter our background, the missionary wanted me to come down to Guyana, South America, because the people in the villages out in the jungles had never had anybody teach on marriage. So they were living their marriages their cultural way, not as followers of Christ. He said, I need you to come and preach that particular message, the one I'm preaching today, on marriage in every village that we can get you to in about a week's time. And I mean, morning and night, I was preaching in villages. Mosquitoes bigger than snakes and lions and bears, oh my. I mean, it was everything. I had to hike 10 miles by foot. I had to go up in dugout canoes in the tributaries off the Essequibo coast. Am I right? Essequibo, oh, she's not here. Essequibo coast. And so all that region, I was in those jungles, the rainforest of South America, preaching that one message over and over and over again. And then we would pray for the husbands and wives to be able to follow Christ this way. So my prayer for you is the same I prayed for every village in South America, that you will follow Christ. And as you follow Christ, that will include in your relationship with your spouse. Now, if you're married, this is for you. If you're not married and may get married one day, this is for you. Because this is what you know you need to become and what you know that those you're looking for to marry you should become. And if you're not married and you say, I ain't ever getting married, then just take some notes and share it with somebody else. Because they may need it someday. All right? Now, let me just be clear. When I get into this, and I'm almost into it, when I really get into it in a moment, somebody in here is going to think, oh, he's talking about me. Let me just be clear. I am. I'm talking about anybody that listen, right? I am talking about you. Sir, I'm talking about how you should be a husband. Because there's some of you, Brother Hayes is in the hospital this week, and I was in there talking with his son and his wife, and while they were doing the procedure and putting the stent in, and he's recovering nicely, still at the hospital, but recovering nicely. And we talked about in the Hispanic world, the word is machismo. Because I pastored in Tampa, which is hugely Hispanic, and most of my church was Hispanic, and the males have what's called machismo. Any Spanish men in the house? Any Spanish ladies in the house? Spanish-speaking ladies? Yeah, am I telling the truth? Yeah, thank you very much. Machismo exists, right? And so that's a ego-based mindset for a man, that he believes he is God's gift to the rest of the earth. And I'm putting it kind. Because a guy with serious machismo can get you in some serious trouble. Now, all of us laughing, and you're worried, am I taking on the Hispanic world? No, I'm taking on every man and all over the world, including me. Because whether we're Hispanic or not, or whatever nationality we come from, whatever ethnicity we come from, whatever background we have, we all have to deal with these same emotions. And many of us are raised in a way that we got to be the man. Brother Charles, was that you? Did you just... Yeah, you only saying that, Brother Charles, because Miss Mary ain't here. I know what's up. Right. None of the men with wives beside them shouted amen. Right? We want to be the man. We're in control. We're the provider. We're the hunter. We're the gatherer. We're the man. And so we want to be in control. But look, those elements are actually a part of your life, but they're not to govern your life. God's to govern your life. Right? God's to govern your life. And God, if you want to know how to be a husband, look at how Jesus is as the groom to the bride of Christ. Don't forget I said that, because I'm going to come back to it in just a moment. We're going to go fly. Righteous marriage relationships start with me. Genesis chapter 2. We're going to get through Genesis all the way to Revelation today. Hope you brought lunch. No, I'm not going to be long. God said, it is not good that man to be alone. Not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper, a companion for him. And God put the man into a deep sleep. First recorded surgery is in Genesis. as he slept, he removed one of his ribs. I had ribs yesterday. I had ribs on Valentine's Day. And as I'm sitting there gnawing on both of those ribs, I'm reminded that my wife came from me. Removed one of his ribs and replaced it with flesh. God then used that rib he had taken from the man to make the woman. And he presented her to the man. So women are a gift from God. Thank you, ladies. None of the men shouted amen. Men, that was your time. I'm trying to help you, men. Pay attention to when you should shout. Not when I'm going to be in control. It should be God. God gave us our wives as a gift. Yeah. Well, there was some amens and one no. Oh, I thought you said no. I was going to pray for resurrection because you're about to get killed if you said no. We're going to have a little fun. God then used it, and he made woman and presented her to the man. Women are a present from God. Then man said, now this is the man talking. Now look here, men. This is what you should be saying. Finally, he had all the animals of the kingdom. He had all the fruits and vegetables out there, all the fish and all the birds and all of creation. And nothing satisfied him like the gift of God, a woman. Finally, he said, bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. I'm trying to figure out, you told me to name the rest of them. I'm trying to figure out, whoa, man. What a gift. Right? Woman was made for man. Therefore, look at this verse. This is the critical verse. I tell this story when I preach this message because it came from pain for me. It came from hurt. I become a lead pastor. I've been pastored about 4 or 5 years. We were having a revival. God was moving. And then in about a 3-month to 6-month period, I had 6 or 7 leaders all come to see me, most of them older than me, and their marriage was on the rocks. I'm talking about my worship leader. I'm talking about my deacons. I'm talking about my education directors. Every big leadership position. Their marriage was in trouble. And I mean, when I say trouble, I'm going to tell you the end of the story first. We lost half of them. And we saved half of them. That's how much trouble. I ain't playing. It was bad. And I'll never forget praying. This is where this message is born. During that time of hurt and pain, and I couldn't help them. I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know what to do. I knew how to fast and pray, but I didn't have all the answers. And I was praying in the altars, and I was about this position. There's the pulpit, this position in that church, and I had my Bible in my hand, and I said, God, I don't have the answer. Because here's where I was at, because I was watching my close friends in leadership in so much pain and hurt and their lives being torn apart that I was convinced I was not a good leader. Somehow it became my fault. Well, how many of you know that kind of guilt comes from the enemy, right? But I'm taking it all. I'm a leader. I'm going to put it on my shoulders. Let's go. It's my fault. And God, they need another pastor. They got to have somebody that can help them because I can't help them. I don't know how to help them. I mean, some were involved in adulterous relationships. Some were just going crazy. Some were, I can't even tell you this stuff because it's just ungodly. Unbelievable. And I said, God, I don't have an answer. And here's what God said. Yes, you do. And then I took exception to God. No, you're not hearing what I'm saying. You ever felt like God wasn't hearing what you were saying? And I said, God, no. You're not hearing what I'm saying. I don't have an answer. And he said, yes, you do. I'm in the sanctuary, doors are closed, just me, I'm yelling at God. And I said, God, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And God said, yes, you do. And I said, okay. Where's the answer? Help me to see it. Help me to know it. Help me to understand it. And God said, it's in your hand. How many of you know I did not appreciate what God had to say at that moment? I mean, I really didn't. I'm being transparent. I was angry. I was upset. I was hurt. My friends were hurt. I had a good revival going in our church, and hell was fighting against it. And I said, I don't have an answer. He says, yes, you do. It's in your hand. I have my Bible in my hand. And I said, that's not funny. And that's all he would say. It's in your hand. And so I walked out of that sanctuary dejected, mad, aggravated, and angry. Went to my office and started reading Genesis to Revelation, everything that happened in relationships. If it had to do with marriage, had to do with friendship, had to do anything in relationship, there's something I'm not getting. I took classes in Bible college about family, about relationships, but nothing had given me this understanding. And so I began to read it. When I came across Genesis, that's pretty quick in the Bible, right? When I came across Genesis and I came across this verse, it kind of caught my attention, but then I realized it didn't stop there. It's repeated over and over. It's the only verse I could find in Scripture that's repeated like this. That said to me, this was important. Because God not only repeated himself in the moment, he kept repeating himself. He did it with his words to Moses, who recorded it. Then Jesus said it, and the Gospels record it, the disciples. And then Paul writes it to the church at Ephesus. The same words. And I went, I'd never seen it before. So here it is. Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and embraces his wife, and they become one flesh. There it is. You get it, right? No, you probably don't, and I didn't either. I had to read it over and over again. I had to study it. I had to look up all the other verses about relationship, and that's where I go today. So here we go. In Matthew 19, verse 5 and 6. A man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Since, this is Jesus speaking, red letters in your red letter edition Bible. Since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. So the critical part, did God join you together? And the other critical part, don't you take it apart if God put it together. Ephesians, Paul, to the church at Ephesus that had great revival. Verse 31, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united as one. See, there are four eyes in this verse. I'm going to give you all four quickly. 4 eyes in this verse. It's not 4 eyes. Some of you know that expression, right? 4 eyes. I wear glasses and contacts, so I have 4 eyes. But it's 4 eyes, the letter I. Identity is established in this verse. Interdependence is established in this verse. Intentionality is established in this verse. And intimacy. All 4 eyes. All 4 eyes. And if you're a follower of Christ and can apply these 4 eyes to your life, God's covering and blessing will be over your relationship. But if you're not going to follow Christ, none of this makes sense to you. And if you're not going to follow Christ, trying to do this is always going to be a challenge. Just will be. Because you're governed by other things than what we're governed. We're governed by the king of our heart, not the emotions of our heart. Because if the king of my heart's reigning over my heart, then I don't let my emotions control me anymore. I do what my king says. That's the difference in following Christ and not following Christ. Right? So it's identity, interdependence, intentionality, and intimacy. Let's break it down quickly. Righteous marriage relationships gives you identity. A man leaves his father and mother. In premarital counseling, I will look at couples and say, where are you going to live? And they'll tell me. I said, is that in your mom and daddy's house? And if they say, yeah, I say, nuh-uh. You need to find another place. Because as long as you live in their house, you're always going to be Bobby's boy or Clarice's son, or you're going to be Jean's girl, or you're going to be Junior's girl. You're not going to be Mike and Jeannie. You'll never create your own identity, and yet he says, leave your father and mother and create your own identity. It's big. It's important. Why? Because the covering over you before you got married was your parents. When you got married, the covering shifts. And so you need to leave. I told one couple, I told them that. They came back to me right after they got married and said, Pastor, we're leaving the church. And I said, what? Whoa, what are you doing? And they said, well, you said leave your father and mother. I said, but I didn't say leave the church. I said, don't live with them. Don't live on the same street. Don't live on the same town, on the same side of town. Move across town. But I didn't say nothing about leaving the church. Well, both our set of parents come here. I mean, I changed the way I said that. And they left the church. And they went to a neighboring church, and they became leaders at that church. And they're one of the greatest couples ever because they set their identity in Christ. And they wanted to come out from the umbrella of even the worship umbrella of their parents. Identity comes with a covering, and this is what I was talking about earlier. If you stay in that identity of a follower of Christ, then you will have his covering over you. In a marriage relationship, 1 Corinthians 11:3, in a marriage relationship, there's the authority of Christ to the husband, husband to the wife. Authority of Christ is the authority of God. You stay under that umbrella. Some people illustrate it with umbrellas and show you that. I've done that before. And there's some people say that's not what it means. But look, I can't figure out anything else it does mean. If I'm going to be submitted to Christ, I'm going to do it his way. And I'm going to be the kind of husband Christ is to the bride. And I'm going to be the kind of leader in my household that God is to me. It ain't like my daddy. It ain't like my granddaddies. And one of them was a preacher. No, it's not like them. It's like God is. I want to be Jesus to my family. Do I always succeed? No. But I'm working on it every day. I'm trying to be more like Jesus every day, and it starts at my household. If I can't do it at my house, don't expect me to do it in the church. That's why Paul would say, hey, if the leaders don't work well with their family, and some people say that means control your family. No, it means manage your family. If you don't manage your family situation well, you can't manage the house of the Lord well. Now, I'll go on further than that. If you can't manage your household well, you probably can't manage your business well. If you can't manage your family well, that probably means you can't manage your life well. Why? Because you're trying to do it with the wrong motivation and the wrong attitude and the wrong perspective. It's not your life. Your life is not your own. You've been bought with a price. And if you'll manage yourself and your family and your business and your church the way Jesus manages you, then you'll get it right every time. So here we are under that authority structure. Well, if my husband is my authority and he's not saved, do I submit to Christ or to my husband? Both, if it's possible. But if you have to choose, for instance, I'll give you a quick example. If your husband says for you to do something contrary to the Word of God, I mean absolutely contrary to the Word of God. Let's take something just obscure. If your husband says, go and murder the neighbor, how many know you can't go murder the neighbor? Right? Now you're going to try to be submitted to your husband at that point. You're going to try to come under the authority, but you know that if I do that, we're in trouble. Right? So you don't do that. If what your husband is asking line up with the Word, yes, you stay in that authority structure. But if not, you stay under the authority of Christ. Well, what if I'm a husband and my wife's not serving Christ and she won't come under my authority because I said we should do these things like go to church, and she don't want to go to church? You stay submitted to Christ and keep going to church and invite her to go, but don't beat her up and beat her down because she don't. Love her into the kingdom. Love her into the kingdom. Well, what if my kids don't want to go to church until they're old enough to move out on their own? If they get the chicken out of your bucket, they go to church with you. That's my opinion. The way I did my family. They didn't want to go to church, that's fine, move out. I'm paying for this. You're my liability. You'll go where I say. And that's the only place I really tell you have to go. One time a week, you're going to be in church on Sunday morning. You ain't got to be, look, here's this is going to blow your mind. They didn't even have to be my church. They had to go to a Bible-believing church and be there. And I said, I will check and make sure you're there on time and you don't leave early. Because I was going to create a 1 to 2 hour window. They always had an influence of Jesus over their life, whether it's me or not. Am I right? Yeah. Caleb tried to sneak out. I busted him down. No, he didn't. I don't remember him doing that. So first one, identity. Second, interdependence. It's the coming together. It's the not being able to break apart. It's about what he said. But here it's the super glue. The super glue is supposed to have a bond if it's set that you can't break. The elements around it may break, but the glue bond itself will not. And this word in the Hebrew is the same kind of word, that it's something that can't be broken. You may break all around it, but it will not be broken because God put it together. It's super glued together. Here's how Jesus said it in the New Testament. Since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. In other words, God's not going to split you apart. Look, there are some people that have said to me, very few, but a few, have come to me and said, well, God wants me to get a divorce. And I'm trying to be very kind, cautious, guarded. I say, well, look, I understand where you're at and what's going on and all that, but that's not a biblical statement. Now, if they've committed adultery, if they're an unbeliever and they want out, or there's abuse in your life where they're physically abusing you, then yeah, you need to get out. I'll support that 100%. But I've seen the same situations where people have been adulterous, or they have been an unbeliever, or they have been even abusive, and God turned the whole thing around, changed the individual, and they end up being married. And there's a lot of steps in that. It's not an easy magic pixie dust formula, right? There it is. No. There was a long journey. But I've seen God do it. I've seen God do it. And so all I ever tell couples when they say they are going in that direction, leave the window cracked. Give God the opportunity to turn things around. That's all I'm asking. All I'm asking, give God an opportunity. And look, even since I've been here, there have been families that have gone through some very tough times. And they've come to me, and had God not done something, they wouldn't be married today. But today they are married because they left the window open. And over time, God began to soften their hearts. And things changed. So don't split apart what God's put together. Let me give you a quick illustration. My grandmother, if you've been here, you've heard this story, but my grandmother was 14, 15 years old when she married my grandfather. Any 14, 15-year-olds? Yeah. Right there. Stand up right there, sweetheart. She married my grandfather, who was 22. Stay standing. Any 22-year-old men? 22, 23, 21-year-old men. Anybody near that age? Nobody wants to own up to it right now because I'm illustrating. Oh, right there. Yeah. Stand up there. 22? 21? Almost 22? Keep standing. Oh, wait a minute. And another one. No, y'all ain't bidding on her. Sit down, man. You had your chance a while ago. Sit down. It's this fella up here. He stood up first. 22 years old, marrying a 14, 15-year-old. Woo! We was country folks from South Georgia, poor. My grandfather was a sharecropper. Now, I didn't say sit down. Thank you. So, at 22, my grandfather had already been married once. Oh, he got a divorce? No. His wife and 2 kids died from influenza. Poor people can't afford a doctor. Some of them can't afford to go to town to get to the doctor. That was my family. And he lost his wife and both children before he turns 22. Then he marries a 14, 15-year-old, short, little Indian girl. She's about half Creek Indian and half white. And he's a tall, lanky farmer. No, I'm not even sure what heritage, something whitish is all I could say. Probably a big mixture of things, right? So he marries this little Indian girl, and they get married and start having babies. Before they ever have their first baby, they haven't been married very long. I'm told, the story I'm told, that they haven't been married very long, and they had their fight, their first big to-do. And this little Indian girl, she's going to stand her ground. Right? Look at her bow her neck up right there. Yeah, she's going to stand her ground. And my grandfather, they have their fight. He goes off wherever he's gone to farm or work or whatever. Now you can sit down. She gets her bag, which was a literally cardboard suitcase made out of cardboard. Her croaker sack dress, which is really the only dress that she could afford, made out of croaker sacks. She loads them up, and she travels by foot to her father's house. My grandfather, who was a Church of God preacher. I didn't know him. He died before I was born. She gets to his house and sits on the porch. Door's locked up. He's out working somewhere in the farm or whatever, and waits till he gets home. He gets home on his buck wagon. That's a little wagon driven by a little horse or mule. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" He looks and sees a suitcase and said, "Well, Bill and I had our first fight, and I ain't staying." And my grandfather, I'm told, did not say another word. He reached over on that little porch, grabbed her little cardboard suitcase, put it in the back of the wagon. He reached over on that porch, picked up his daughter, 14, 15 years old, put her on that wagon, and got up in the wagon on the buckboard and said, "Giddy up." And drove across the countryside to the house where they lived. And put my grandmother out on their steps with her bag, sat back up in the buckboard, looked at her and said, "This is your house now." And you know what he said next? "Giddy up. Thank you. You did a great job." You say that was mean, that was harsh, that was bad. I was there. Not for all that. I was there for the 50th wedding anniversary as a child. I was there for the 60th wedding anniversary. If my great-grandfather had not taken the position to support the relationship, that they would be super glued together, I wouldn't be here today. So I'm thankful. Did they get along? Did they fight? Did he abuse her? Not to my knowledge. The only physical thing I ever saw my grandfather do is when my grandmother, who's now a little larger, no taller, just a little larger, stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room next to the firewood stove, literally firewood stove. And they were arguing, and after we had something to eat, and she stood there, wasn't going to let him get by, and he just moved her out of the way and went right on by. Went outside and cooled off. They cooled off, and that was before the 50th wedding anniversary, if I remember right, and before the 60th. They worked it out. You need to work it out. You need to work it out. We need more of my granddaddies in the world today that'll look at their children and say, "This is your house now. You're going to work it out." Because we keep going back, destroying the identity by taking them back into our homes. Right? Now, again, if it's volatile or there's abuse, we got a different scenario. Are you with me? Hear me clearly. I tell people, anybody that's in any type of abusive situation, I say, "Are you safe?" If their answer is no, get safe. And I get them to define that for me a little bit so I can help them. And now this is the one point I say this all year long. I don't say it another time. If I ever find out anybody is abusing someone and they're a part of my influence, they're in this church, And I usually address the men because most of the time it would be a man. Sometimes it is a lady. You need to get your situation straightened out, or I'll come see you. That's just me. That's not your pastor. That's not Reverend Mike Tedder. That's Mike Tedder that knows how to go bama on your head. Pick on somebody your own size, and let's go. You got to hit somebody, come hit me. And we'll settle it like men. Out back. I just say that one time a year. Pastor, you mean that? You don't want to know. Don't ever try. Because I know some other men in the church have already said, I'm with you when we go. That's the way they used to do it in the small communities. Fella get out of hand, they'd straighten him out. Right? It's like living at home and mom and daddy, take a switch. Anybody ever had a switch? Anybody ever had a Board of Education applied to the seat of learning? I won't tell you how many I have, but I learned how they work. Woo! Come on, I'm going to finish up now. So we're going to go with identity, and we're going to go with interdependent, and then we're going to go with intentionality. Here's the intentional part. And I'm going to go refer to the New Testament to play this out. The intentional plans Paul gave to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians chapter 5. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy. And then he goes on and explains all that, and then he finishes up, husbands, each one of you must also love your wife as he loves himself. So you got to love. I won't read all of it. I'm just going to read that first part to save a little time. It's Ephesians 5:25-33. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Sir, you know how Jesus loved the church? He gave himself. You know what that means? He died. So you got to die. Ma'am, if you're looking for a husband, go down by the graveyard. Because you're going to start with the dead men first. Now, I'm not talking about physical death, right? And I'm not talking about being dead to dreams and aspirations. But if anything would rise above who you're supposed to be to your family, that has to die. Whatever Christ defines you as a husband and a father, everything else dies compared to that. Right? God's got you in that position. So, women, you are looking for a dead man. Then, it goes on to say, John 15, I said it the other day, verse 13. Righteous relationships are with someone who will lay down their life for you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down his life for his man, for his friend. An intentional plan includes women who will be submissive and win without words. I know it's the one time I risk all the ladies not coming back. 1 Peter chapter 3. Now, interestingly enough, there's argument about Paul not being married, so he was pretty hard on the men and the ladies. But Peter was married, we know that, and he was pretty hard on the women. That might be a pretty interesting fact. But here's what Peter said. Under the anointing of the Holy Spirit, wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands. Let me help you, ladies. It comes back to the authority issue. Submission is not something it's not a rug mat. It's not to be beat down on. Submission means sub means under. You come under the mission of another. If that mission is not following Christ and you're trying to follow Christ, then you got a choice to make, right? But if you can come under that mission, that's what you're doing. Sir, listen to me. Sir, listen to me. Sir, listen to me. You give your wife a mission worth following, she'll never have a problem following it. Never had a lady disagree with that. But if you ain't giving them no mission, she's looking for something to follow. So, submit. That's what submission means. Listen to what he goes on to say. So that if any of them do not believe, this is for those that may be people that don't believe, may be won over without words, but by the behavior of their wives. Your behavior, this is where actions speak louder than words. And just in case, I don't have time to read it all, but it's with a quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight, down in verse 4. And then in verse 6, it says, don't give way to fear. You're fearful because you're afraid if I get quiet and just do it with my behavior, I'm not going to get anywhere. The truth is you may get somewhere faster. Ladies, here's why. Because inside of every man is this capacity to go crazy. I mean, here's what Solomon wrote in Proverbs. And now Solomon, he's the wisest man ever, but not the smartest man ever. How many wives and concubines did he have? Yeah, he's a wise man, but he ain't the smartest chap. I'm just telling you right now. Right? So, here's what he said, though. It's better to live on the corner of the roof than with that nagging wife. A man would rather live on the corner because he don't have the mental capacity. Do you know how many words a day a woman speaks? It's like astronomical, they say. You know how many words a day a man speaks? It's like less than 10 or less than 20 because they only got 10 fingers and 10 toes to count. I mean, yep, no, good, thanks. That's about their repertoire. So they can't handle a lot of the words, typically. They have to train themselves to listen. Really, they do. They don't have the capacity. They'd rather live on the corner. Another place Proverbs writes, he says, that nagging wife is like a trip, 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 trip. Men, there's times you shout, and men, there's times you might not want to shout. But there might be a lot of truth in what Proverbs had to say, right? Right? Because it's true. They can't handle it. Men don't have the capacity. I'm not saying they're not smart or wise or don't have a mental IQ. I'm saying they don't have the capacity to handle lots of words. In premarital counseling, I tell them, go to bottom line first, right, ladies? I say, go to bottom line first. Why? Because if you're out trying to buy a vehicle and you talk about all the detail of the vehicle, you done lost the man. But if you say that thing's like $29,500, he says, oh, no, that ain't in my price range. And he moves on. He don't even look at anything else. Give him bottom line first. Give him just one or two words. That's all he can handle. Ladies, listen to him. I'm going to say this to you. I'm going to tell you. The moment, whatever you want or whatever you're trying to communicate, the moment he gives you the glazed over look. How many sisters know what that looks like? Thank you very much. That means they just like glaze over. You know they're in another world. They ain't listening to you no more. That's usually within less than 2 minutes, by the way. But when they give you the glazed over look, whatever you're looking for or want, you just got permission for. Because it wasn't enough drive in them to cause them to combat with it or change it or to deal with it. So they're just going to release it to you. That's the glazed over look. So when you get the glazed over look for that new dress, go on and buy it. You ain't got to say nothing else. Just go get it. He good. He might go to Lowe's. But that's all right. Let him have a little therapy. Don't give way to fear. So it's this concept of identity, interdependence, and intentionality. Be the husband and be the wife that God has called you to be. And the last part is the intimacy. It's the intimacy. Listen, I'm out of time, but I got to get this in. It's the intimacy. It's the intimacy. Now, intimacy, let me just say this to the men because usually it applies more to them than the women. But intimacy is not another word for sex. But it's true, right? Now, intimacy may include sex, but it's not another word for sex. Because you tell a man be intimate in a marriage counseling situation, they're going, let's go, honey. Where are we going? We're going to the hotel. Why? Because he just said have sex. No, he didn't say the word sex at all. He just said intimacy, right? So you need to have intimacy and understand where it starts. And I'm going to say a couple things quickly. 1 Corinthians 7, 1-5. Because there is so much sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife. Not multiple wives, not multiple sex partners. His own wife. Each woman should have her own husband. Not multiple men. Not somebody on the down low. Not somebody on the side. Not somebody you go see from your past. Nuh-uh. Your own husband, your own wife. And each woman should have her own husband. The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs. Now, this is the NLT. When I read this for the first time, I hadn't been saved. I don't even know if I've been saved a year. And we were in our Sunday school class for the teenagers, the high school teens. It's the only type of youth group we had. There were probably 7 or 8 people in the room, and my head football coach and the lady, they were Miss Von Seal Majors. They were in there, Coach J. Jeffco. They were teaching the class. I'll never forget, I was sitting there, and we were using the King James Bible. And the King James does not say sexual needs. What it says is the husband shall fulfill his wife marital duties. That's the word, marital duties. And my coach said to me in front of all the other class, Mike, what do you think the marital duties are? Now remember, I ain't been saved but a few months. And I said, well, I guess that means she should be cooking and cleaning and fixing and doing and working. Because at this point in my early walk with Christ, I didn't even know God talked about sex. So I was like, everybody snickering because they all grew up in church. They knew what it meant. They just didn't want to answer the question. And I got put on the spot. And so I answered the only way I knew how to answer because I didn't think God talked about those things. Let me help you. God not only talks about them, he created them. Right? And so then they told me, and then I was embarrassed. You know, because I didn't know God talked about that. But I'm going to tell you what I did. That Sunday afternoon, I did a Bible study on sex. Because I wanted to find out everything God had to say about that. Because I was coming out of a lifestyle that I was living in sexual immorality. And I needed to change that about me. I didn't even know what all I needed to change. I started reading it and found out. So I'm glad for that day, even though I was a little embarrassed. But here's what it says. Husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's sexual needs. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. So there's this intimate relationship that has to happen and should happen, and it's not like I got to, it's because you want to. You love each other. You're going to express intimacy. Now, ladies have multiple languages they speak with, and they change the language on the fly without prior notice. So they're talking one way, and you thought they were just saying something, but they weren't saying that. They were saying something else because you didn't understand it, because we just a fella, and we only got about 2 languages. English and sex. That's the only 2 languages men have. We're physical. We're physical in nature, right? We want to fix it. We want to hunt it. We want to gather it. We want to sex it. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, right? That's what we do. We're physical. And so we talk in physical terms. So, men, let me help you. That is not the primary language for most ladies. It is one of about 5 to 7 languages they speak. But it's not a primary language. Ma'am, we can debate it, argue it, challenge it all day long, but inside every man, they're driven for the physical. And that's the primary language. They may learn 1 or 2 others over the course of a lifetime. They may learn serving is a language. They may learn doing is a language. But not many more beyond that. Some will. Some will work really hard at it. So this intimacy is really important. Sir, let me help you. If you will learn to do the intimate things with your wife without the expectation of the physical sex, I've never met a man that wasn't completely satisfied with all the intimate sexual relationship he had. Now, you don't do it for that purpose. You just learn to do it. And then I promise your wife will love to be intimate even in sex with you. Pastor, I can't believe you're preaching that on a Sunday morning. Well, let me tell you, you can go watch it on TV, and it won't be the right stuff. It won't be the biblical, righteous relationship. I want to give you what God created it. We should talk about it in a righteous way. And so I want to do it and bring it to pass. So do not deprive each other of sexual relations unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time, so that you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. So I would say ladies, but there are some men, ladies or men, that want to take a break from the intimate sexual relationship. Listen to what Brother Paul had to say. The only viable reason really is spiritual or physical, if there's a physical problem. And it only should be for a limited time. Because there's drives God's given all of us, men and women, that we're going to look to satisfy one way or another, and we won't catch it until usually we've gone too far. It's not the right thing, it's the wrong thing. Because most people that I counsel that have gone through that, they say, I can't believe I did that. It doesn't mean they didn't know they didn't do it. They can't believe they lost control. It goes back to what I said about not having sex before you get married, right? If you get on the roller coaster, going up is slow, but coming down, momentum, you can't stop. So don't get on the coaster. Now you're married, you're on the coaster, and you're not allowed to get back on. That's tough. That's just tough, right? So be careful with that. Be conscious of that. Share, because look what happens. Not only does God know that, Satan knows that. Look at this. Afterward, you should come together again so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. You can argue with me all day, but you can't argue with God and his adversary. They know it, they use it, and they destroy people's lives with it. So be conscious of it. Guard your relationship. And the last part is this. Righteous relationships in marriage are loved out loud. And I'm just going to read it. Love in your relationship should never give up. Love in your relationship should care more for your spouse and others in your family than for yourself. Love does not want what it does not have. God gave you a gift in that wife. Don't go looking for any more. Love doesn't strut, and it doesn't have a swelled head. Not prideful, not arrogant, not machismo. Love doesn't force itself on others. Love isn't always me first. Me, 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 me. Love does not fly off the handle. No, it doesn't get easily angered. Love does not keep the score of the sins of others. Love does not keep score of the sins of others. Every time they mess up, we write it down. We call it a prayer request and a prayer journal, but for some of us, it's a scorecard. I told you the story. I had one couple come in years ago, and she walked in, and they were new to the church, and they were having marital problems. They wanted to meet with me. I met with them, and he tells his little bit first, and it wasn't much. I mean, it was a man, right? Yes, no, good, And he was done with his part. She starts in. And about 20 minutes into her conversation, she pulls out 3 notebooks. Every line on every page from the day they first went out, not married, she wrote down stuff he had done wrong. I never had it before. I've never had it since. And if you got it, just go ahead and burn it. I don't want to see another one. I couldn't believe it. I really was in shock. And I said, you know what you need to do with those notebooks? What? I said, you need to burn them today. In fact, we can walk out here. I've got a grill sitting outside the church. I got a lighter. We'll go burn them right now. She would not give them up. And I said to her, as only as honest as I could, I said, look, if you're not willing to burn that, give it up, not keep score of the sins of others, I can't help you. Because you're not going to do what God says. Nothing I say matters. And so don't keep score. Some of you don't have notebooks, but you got mine. You get in this little tidbit, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, and last week. And last year. And you remember 10 years ago on a Saturday night at 7:14? You remember the night we got married and we were in the car driving and you said, that's keeping score. Don't do it. It does not serve anything. Don't revel when others grovel. Don't beat them when they're down. You're there to build them up. I don't care what they did to you. You're there to build them up. Take pleasure in the flowering of the truth. And we love that one when it applies to everybody else but us. Oh, yeah, you should tell the truth. But we don't like it when the truth is told sometimes about us. What we said, what we did, right? Or we don't like it when it's told and it hurts our feelings. That's not what he said. He just said, take pleasure. Love takes pleasure in the flowering of the truth. Love puts up with anything. I am so glad my wife loves Jesus, because that puts up with anything is what she's had to do for this April 28th at 3 p.m. will be 40 years. She's put up with a lot of anything. Yeah. Trust God always. Always trust God. Always looks for the best. You hear that? Always looks for but you don't know the pain. Always looks for, you don't know what I've been through. Always looks for the best. Not looking for the worst. It won't serve anything. Never looks back and keeps going to the end. That's the love that you should be living out loud with. Stand with me all over this facility. Thank you for your patience. Father, I pray right now for your love to be so real and so rich in our life that we will never, ever back away from our relationship. In fact, we will be who you want us to be. Do how you want us to do. As men, as husbands, as wives, as ladies. And we will be all about what you want us to be about. Now here's what I want to
Hey everyone, this is Pastor Melissa, the online pastor here at the Tabernacle. We wanted to say thank you so much for watching our online service here on our YouTube channel. If you need any prayer for anything, whether that be for healing, breakthrough, or a response to salvation, feel free to email us at prayer@thetabonline.com. We would love to connect with you in that way. And if you want any more additional information about our church, you can visit us at thetabonline.com.